In recent years, many people, especially those living in Western countries, have noticed significant increases in local prices and rent, leading to higher living costs. This phenomenon is known as inflation. The principle of inflation is actually quite simple. In a country or economy, there are two things on the balance: products and money. Money is essentially a representation of products because it is portable, easy to mass produce, and facilitates transactions. Generally, the amount of money produced should match the amount of products. However, if a country produces more money without a corresponding increase in products, it means that more money is representing the same quantity of products. In layman's terms, products become more expensive, or one could say the currency has devalued because the same amount of money now buys less. Throughout human history, many countries have experienced severe inflation. In this video, we will first look at China from 1945 to 1949. During this period, the Chinese currency fell from 4 yuan per US dollar at its issuance to 130 yuan per grain of rice in just a few months. We will explore why China experienced such severe inflation at this time and how they responded to it, hoping to draw some lessons and insights. Let's start with some necessary background information. In August 1945, after 14 years of grueling war, China, along with the Allies, finally defeated the Japanese invader. At this time, the Kuomintang, Nationalist Party of China government was China's ruling party, controlling a vast territory and population, and boasting an army of 8 million. The Chinese Communist Party, however, was smaller, with only 1 million troops. In 1946, the United States proposed a plan to form a coalition government between the Kuomintang and the Communist Party. But Chiang Kai-shek, chairman of the Kuomintang, considering himself the John Wick and the Communists merely a Jim Carrey, rejected the American proposal and launched a full-scale war against the Communists, sparking the Chinese Civil War. At that time, the currency used in China was called the Fabi, which was the first type of fiat money used in China since it entered the modern era. What exactly is fiat money? We all know that money is a tool used in transactions for exchanging goods. Suppose I produce goods worth 1,000 yuan per month, then I would need to print at least 1,000 yuan in banknotes, a principle we just discussed. These banknotes themselves have no intrinsic value. The real value lies in the 1,000 yuan worth of goods. Fiat money is supported by a country's own production capacity and tax revenue capabilities, backing the value of the currency. A country's ability to produce and earn money is the basic guarantee for its fiat currency. In other words, if I have money, I must be able to exchange it for goods. If a country's production capacity is insufficient, making it impossible for my money to purchase goods, then people will lose trust in the currency. After 14 years of grueling resistance against Japanese invasion, the whole of China was left devastated. In addition to the substantial expenditure during the war against Japan and the corruption and embezzlement at all levels of the Kuomintang government, the production and tax collection capabilities of the government were significantly reduced. As a result, they had to rely on continuously issuing more fiat money, commonly referred to as printing money, to balance the deficit. By 1945, the issuance of fiat money had increased nearly 400 times compared to 1937. After the Civil War began, the Kuomintang government showed no improvement compared to during the war against Japan. Due to severe corruption and mismanagement, This government was disorganized and lacked the ability to restore production. Tax revenues were also heavily embezzled. Additionally, because of the full-scale civil war, military expenditures began to skyrocket again. With little income and high expenditures, the Kuomintang government could only continue printing money to balance its spending. From 1945 to 1948, the issuance of fiat money increased by 1,085 times. At its most extreme, some paper mills even used low-denomination fiat money banknotes as raw materials for paper making. When citizens needed to buy rice or flour, they had to carry bags full of banknotes and queue up to purchase. By the time it was your turn after several hours, your bag of money had already devalued, allowing you to buy even less rice or flour. When inflation became so severe, the Kuomintang government could only undertake currency reform. They planned to issue a new currency called the Chinese Gold Yuan, initially conceived as a gold standard currency. Unlike the fiat money, this currency was to be pegged to the value of gold. Only as much currency as there was gold could be issued, thereby stabilizing the value of the currency and solving the problem of inflation. However, the actual implementation did not go as planned and resulted in considerable chaos. The first rule of issuing the new currency made the remaining assets of many impoverished people worthless. The government began issuing Chinese gold yuan on August 19, 1948, stipulating that the gold yuan would replace the fiat money, with 3 million fiat money being exchanged for 1 Chinese gold yuan. The public was required to complete the exchange of all their fiat money within 4 months. However, some provincial banks never received any Chinese gold yuan, leaving local people unable to exchange their money and forced to watch it become worthless. Moreover, the issuance of subsidiary coins, which are denominations less than 1 yuan, was extremely low. Suppose you had 300,000 fiat money and the local bank did not have any 10-cent Chinese gold yuan, then your fiat money could not be exchanged into Chinese gold yuan. In many impoverished areas, the denominations of the fiat money held by the common people were very low, and all of it turned into worthless paper. The second rule significantly reduced the purchasing power of the Chinese gold yuan. The government mandated that all national goods and labor prices be frozen at the levels of August 19th. However, state-owned enterprises and public institutions were not subject to this rule, which clearly favored the government with the double standard. For example, state-owned shipping prices immediately increased by 90% and state-owned oil prices by 60%. As a result, private sector products, constrained by price caps and lacking profit, either ceased operations or moved to the black market to sell at higher prices. Ordinary people could not afford to buy items on the black market with their Chinese gold yuan, and regular stores had no goods, leading to dwindling confidence in the Chinese gold yuan. The interests of ordinary urban residents were compromised under such chaotic management. The third rule allowed the government to use the issuance of the Chinese gold yuan to absorb a significant amount of private wealth. After the issuance of the Chinese gold yuan, the government prohibited private possession of gold, silver, and foreign currency, demanding that people exchange these hard currencies for Chinese gold yuan by September 30th, or face confiscation. Those with foreign currency held overseas were required to register it with the central bank. Upon the announcement of this order, ordinary city dwellers honestly exchanged their gold and silver dollars for Chinese gold yuan, as these ordinary people had no capacity to resist the government. However, wealthy capitalists were different. They had many ways to hide their accumulated wealth in gold, silver, and foreign currency. Moreover, they hoarded supplies, preventing ordinary people from purchasing daily necessities. When the scarcity of daily necessities reached an extreme, they would sell the hoarded goods at high prices. Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Kuomintang, sent his son Chiang Ching-kuo to Shanghai to oversee the issuance of the Chinese gold yuan and to stop the chaos. Initially, Chiang Ching-kuo did execute some capitalists who did not comply with the regulations and disrupted the market. However, it wasn't long before Chiang Ching-kuo's oversight efforts were personally halted by Chiang Kai-shek and his wife, Song Meiling. Why? Because Chiang Ching-kuo discovered that his own cousin, Kong Lin Kan's company, was also suspected of illegal activities and planned to investigate and prosecute him. Kong Lin Kan was Song Meiling's nephew, so she pressured Chiang Kai-shek to stop the investigation. And Chiang Kai-shek had no choice but to fly back to Shanghai from the front lines to personally dissuade Chiang Ching-kuo. Ultimately, under the personal protection of Chiang Kai-shek and Song Meiling, Chiang Ching-kuo had to let Kong Lin Kan off and resign himself. The people of Shanghai sarcastically remarked that Chiang family only targeted the small flies and not the big tigers. This incident offended the urban middle class who had some savings, as well as the wealthy small capitalists whose wealth was forcibly exchanged into Chinese gold yuan, and it destroyed people's confidence in the government. The middle class had taken a significant risk by having their gold and foreign currency exchanged by the state into Chinese gold yuan, which might again become worthless. And the wealthy small capitalists, seeing that companies related to Chiang Kai-shek were spared, were grinding their teeth in anger. Such chaotic management practices instantly alienated three classes of people. There were already few supporters of the Kuomintang, and this incident completely alienated its remaining supporters. However, compared to what followed, such losses were actually insignificant. The Chinese gold yuan, being a gold standard currency, needed gold reserves for issuance. What are reserves? Simply put, if I plan to issue 10 historically accurate yuan, I must have some gold, say 5 grams, and then stipulate that 2 historically accurate yuan can be exchanged for 1 gram of gold. In other words, no matter the ratio, the historically accurate yuan I issue must be convertible into gold. If I ran out of gold, then I can no longer issue historically accurate yuan. This gold would be my reserve. Since its issuance, the Chinese gold yuan were not fully backed by gold. Only 40% of the reserves consisted of gold, silver, and foreign currency, while the remaining 60% were represented by securities and state assets. The total value of all these reserves was $500 million with a plan to issue 2 billion Chinese gold yuan. However, the problem was that the 60% in securities and assets was cobbled together from various state-owned asset valuations, which were not only overestimated but also fundamentally unstable. This meant that if more Chinese gold yuan were to be issued in the future, it would only require arbitrarily adjusting the value of these assets used as reserves without needing to prepare more actual reserves to support the excessive issuance of the money. This means they could print as much money as they wanted. Indeed, as military defeats mounted, the Kuomintang government's military expenditure continued to increase, necessitating the massive issuance of Chinese gold yuan to balance the deficit. On November 11, 1948, less than 3 months after the issuance of the Chinese gold yuan, the government adjusted the exchange rate from 4-1 to 20-1 against the US dollar, beginning the overissuance of the money. The public's 100 yuan suddenly became worth only 20 yuan. But this was just the beginning of the disaster. As the Chinese gold yuan were massively overissued in the following months, by April 1949, it took 200,000 Chinese gold yuan to exchange for $1 US, and the Chinese gold yuan quickly became worthless. So what was the outcome of this disaster? If you ask the Kuomintang, they would tell you it was not a disaster, but hitting the jackpot. In the early stages of the Chinese gold yuan issuance, the nationalist government confiscated 1.663 million taels of gold, 8.937 million yuan in silver ingots, 24.038 million yuan in silver dollars, 47.735 million yuan in US dollars, and 87.325 million yuan in Hong Kong dollars, totaling an equivalent of 190 million US dollars. As the civil war turned against them, Chiang Kai-shek transferred this amassed wealth from the mainland, along with previously accumulated treasury gold and foreign exchange, to Taiwan. This wealth, converted into gold, was approximately 380 tons, equivalent to 425.6 million US dollars. You might think this isn't a lot of money, but consider that at the time, Taiwan had a population of 6 million, plus 2 million nationalist defectors, officials, and their families, totaling 8 million. By the end of 1949, the mainland under the communist government had a population of about 540 million, and the communist government had only about 20 million US dollars in hard currency, which was 4.7% of what the Kuomintang government held in Taiwan. The Kuomintang government used such a substantial amount of hard currency as reserve money for the new Taiwan dollar, successfully stabilizing Taiwan's economy and making an indelible contribution to its subsequent economic boom. For the 540 million people on the mainland, this severe inflation crisis was an unequivocal disaster. Countless ordinary people became impoverished in this turmoil. So what can we learn from this? At the very least, we now have a basic understanding of currency, that whether it is fiat money or standard currency, it must have corresponding value. The value corresponding to fiat money is the government's ability to produce or earn money. The value of standard currency is the reserves. With this understanding, you can generally judge whether a currency is overissued at its launch and whether it might cause severe inflation. As an ordinary person living in a society with volatile currency values, the best thing to do is to preserve your hard currency as much as possible to maintain your wealth. That's it for this video. Next time, we'll look at Germany's currency crisis during World War I and see what we can learn from it. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions or comments, leave me a message. See you next time!